it was. The thing about Ayers Rock is that by the time you finally get there, you are already a little sick of it. Even when you are 1,000 miles from it, you can't go a day in Australia without seeing it 4 or 5 or 6 times. On postcards, on travel agents' posters, on the cover of souvenir picture books, and as you get nearer, the rock is frequently of exposure increases. So you're aware as you drive to the park entrance and pay the ambitiously pitched admission fee of 15 Australian dollars a head and follow the approach road around that you have driven 1,300 miles to look at a large, inert, loaf-shaped object that you have seen photographically portrayed 1,000 times already. In consequence, your mood as you approach this famous monolith is restrained, unexpectant, pessimistic even. And then you see it, and you're instantly transfixed. There, in the middle of a memorable and imposing emptiness, stands an eminence of exceptional nobility and grandeur, 1,150 feet high, a mile and a half long, 5.5 miles around, less red than photographs have led you to expect, but in every other way more arresting than you could ever have supposed. I have discussed this since with many other people. Nearly all of them agreed that they approached Uluru with a kind of fatigue and were left agog in a way they could not adequately explain. It's not that Uluru is bigger than you had supposed, or more perfectly formed, or in any way different from the impression you had created in your mind, but the very opposite. It is exactly what you expected it to be. You know this rock. You know it in a way that has nothing to do with calendars and the covers of your souvenir books. Your knowledge of this rock is grounded in something much more elemental. In some odd way that you don't understand and can't begin to articulate, you feel an acquaintance with it, a familiarity on an unfamiliar level. Somewhere in the deep sediment of your being, some long dormant fragment of primordial memory, some little severed tail of DNA has twitched or stirred. It is a motion much too faint to be understood or interpreted, but somehow you feel certain that this large, brooding, hypnotic presence has an importance to you at the special species level, perhaps even at a sort of tadpole level, and that in some way your visit here is more than happenstance. I'm not saying that any of this is so. I'm just saying that this is how you feel. The other thought that strikes you, that struck me anyway, is that Uluru is not merely a very splendid and mighty monolith, but also an extremely distinctive one. More than this, it is an extremely recognizable one, very possibly the most immediately recognizable natural object on Earth. I'm suggesting nothing here, but I will say that if you are an intergalactic traveler who had broken down in our solar system, the obvious direction to rescue us would be go to the third planet and fly around till you see the big red rock. You can't miss it. If ever on Earth they dig up 150,000-year-old rocket ship from the galaxy Zog. This is where it will be. I'm not saying I expect it to happen, not saying that at all. I'm just observing that if I were looking for an ancient starship, this is where I would start digging. Alan, I noted, seemed similarly affected. It's weird, isn't it? He said. What is? I don't know, just seeing it. I mean, it just feels weird. I nodded. It does feel weird. Quite apart from that initial shock of indefinable recognition, there is also the fact that Uluru is, no matter how you approach it, totally arresting. You cannot stop looking at it. You don't want to stop looking at it. As you draw closer, it becomes even more interesting. It is more pitted than you had imagined, less regular in shape. There are more curves and divots and wave-like ribs, more irregularities of every type than are evident from even a couple of 100 yards away. You realize that you could spend quite a lot of time, possibly a worryingly large amount of time, possibly sell your house and move here to live in a tent amount of time, just looking at the rock, gazing at it from many angles, never tiring of it. You can see yourself in a silvery ponytail, barefoot, and in something jangly and loose-fitting, hanging out with much younger visitors and telling them. And the amazing thing is that every day it's different. You know what I am saying? It's never the same rock twice. That's right, my friend. You put your finger on it there. That it's awesome. It's an awesome thing. Say, do you by any chance have any dope or some spare change? We stood at several places to get out and have a look, including the spot where you can climb up it. It takes several hours and much exertion, which comfortably eliminated it from our consideration, and in any case the route was closed for the afternoon. So many people have collapsed and died on the rock that they close it to climbers when the weather is really warm, as it was this day. Even when it's not too hot, lots of people get in trouble from fooling around or taking wrong turns. Just the day before, a Canadian had to be rescued after getting himself onto some ledge from which he could not get either up or down. Since 1985, ownership of the rock has been back in the hands of the local Aboriginal people, the Pitjantjatjara and Yankunytjatjara, and they deeply dislike visitors, whom they call Minga or ants, clumbering all over it. Personally, I don't blame them. It is a sacred site to them. I think it should be for everyone, frankly. We stopped at the visitors center for a cup of coffee and to look at the displays, which were all to do with interpretations of the dream time, the Aborigines' traditional conception of how the earth was formed and operates. There was nothing instructive in a historical or geological sense, which was disappointing because I was curious to know what Uluru is doing there. How do you get the biggest rock in existence onto the middle of an empty plain? It turns out, I looked in a book later, that Uluru is what is known to geology as a bone hard, a hunk of weather-resistant rock left standing when all else around it was worn away. Bone hearts are not that uncommon. The Devil's Marbles are a collection of miniature bone hearts, but nowhere else on Earth has one lump of rock been left in such dramatic and solitary splendor or assumed such a pleasing, smooth symmetry. It is 100 million years old. Go there, man. Afterward, we had one last drive around the rock before heading back to the lonely highway. We had been at the site for barely 2 hours, obviously not nearly enough, but I realized as I turned around in my seat to watch it shrinking into the background behind us that there never could be enough, and I felt moderately comforted by that thought. Anyway, I would be back. I have no doubt of that. And next time I'm bringing a really good metal detector.